Hey everyone, we're back on Disclosure Day. Well, the first Disclosure Day, hopefully the first of many. But Paul and I have been, um, thinking about, okay, what should we talk about this week? And we were going to talk about screen memories, which is a very interesting, it's a very important topic, for anyone that's had, encounters. But with this news, that I'm sure everyone is seeing now that, well, the files were released and the whole topic of disclosure coming to the forefront and starting to hit the mainstream, that'd be good to talk about a little bit about what's going on. And as always, some of the issues, because this is a minefield that we're going to start walking through, and it's going to take years. This is going to be a slow process because it's a big mess. But from my perspective, I think it's very positive. It's a very good start. It's just good that we're finally discussing it. That it's at least something that's out in the open. People talk about it. It's not something to just laugh at and ridicule. So it's step one of a many step process, but it's good. I don't know. What do you think, Paul? What do you think about this?
Um, I just want to say that it's I'm underwhelmed. If that's can be said. I thought that there'd be more information and that, and obviously they have it, but they're just not putting it out there. And I sort of asked the Grok to show me some of the more outstanding images, and it showed me three dots, and I was like, "Oh no." But to be fair, we're swinging from one side to the other. So we've got groups of pastors having meetings, and you've probably heard about that. And everyone's saying that a lot of people saying that aliens are fallen angels, and it's just it couldn't be a bigger mess if they tried.
Yeah, no, that definitely seems to be for sure true. It is a giant mess. I think that's why it's going to take so long. That's why it's a little bit underwhelming right now. I mean, it's pretty clear at this point that there's a fight going on inside the government. There's various factions, somewhat more disclosure, somewhat less. So that this process is going to take some time to figure out. What I think is positive is that now, it's going to be, you can't put the genie back in the bottle at this point. It's going to be really, really tough now. Even if, say we have a new president in 2 years or what, or whatever, to come back and say, oh no, it's all a big misunderstanding. There's absolutely nothing there. There's just the pressure is building. So there's definitely so much more they're holding back. I mean, they have craft, they're holding back a whole lot, but it'll take some time. But to me, it's good to get started. Um, I don't know if you saw, Paul, that Dave Grush gave an interview with Judicial Watch early in the week. I listened to it, was good. I think Grush is, really solid. I like the way that he approaches a topic. I like what he says a little bit about, the whole topic of demons, for example. He brought that up. He said, listen, guys, it's premature for us to jump to conclusions. There's a lot we don't know. Like everyone simmer down a little bit, everyone relax. Which I thought was good. But to me, also one of the, notable things is that Judicial Watch is a very mainstream organization. For anyone outside the US, Judicial Watch is a private organization that really focuses on government corruption. They've been up and running for at least 30 years, maybe 40 years. But it's just, they're constantly suing the government, suing the FBI, doing Freedom of Information Act requests, but just on good old fashioned government transparency and corruption. For them to take notice of the UFO issue, I think it shows that this is starting to hit the mainstream. Like most people that watch Judicial Watch will never step anywhere near anything have to do with UFOs, I suspect. So we're starting to see it's going to start reaching a whole lot more, new people. So I think that's very positive.
Look, the problem I've got with a lot of things that are being said is just if all you've got is a hammer, then everything is a nail. That's really what it comes down to. So if your worldview is that it's got to be that, it's got to fit into a box, then that's all you're going to be doing is looking at everything that comes out in that worldview. That's the real problem. I'll give you an example. So into the interdimensionals, generally those beings, and there are multiple levels of interdimensional, by the way. It's not just one area, dimensionally. But if those beings themselves inside that interdimensional space, let's say the eighth dimension, if you want to call it that, they see themselves as corporeal entities inside that, right? If you're in the fifth dimension, which is spirit realm, spirit people can see themselves as being solid, right?
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so to somehow indicate, and I know this is me is going sideways, that there's aliens living under people's houses that are interdimensionals, right? This is not completely not understanding what's going on. People are trying to put everything into one basket, like there's so many different types. And then here's the other thing. The other thing I've heard is that these containers that are genetically created, they host demonic activity. Well, actually, no, they don't. Okay, these beings are highly sentient. Uh, if a person's actually ever had any contact with a malevolent entity, it's not a loving experience, right? So there, if you're having good experiences with beings, and they happen to be in a physical form, and then of course you have to ask yourself who's actually telling the truth. Is it the people with the world view that's sitting inside the box, or is it the other beings? And let's think about this. If we zoom out from where we are right now on this planet and just keep going and going and going, and all we see is that us as a speck, and then suddenly the Milky Way galaxy, then we keep going further and further out, and it's the trillions of galaxies that are around, we start to realize how ridiculous this information is.
Yeah. On the topic of like interdimensionals and, it's like you're right. That's like we have the completely wrong framework because isn't it the case that even if you communicate with spirits, spirits see us as light or as shapeless.
Yes.
Like spirits don't see us as walking around in our bodies because we're separated in frequency. Like we're basically in different dimensions to spirits, essentially to human spirits, right? So
Yeah.
now you're talking about some other type of entity, some other light, some other race that might come from somewhere completely different. It's like the very concept of interdimensional. It almost doesn't make sense, right? It's like we're gonna have to think about this in very new ways. That there's, if something comes into our dimension, okay, now we can interact with it like we would with any other physical being. Maybe they have to create for themselves a body, a craft, or whatever it is, regardless of where they come from. But it's interesting that within their dimension, they see themselves as being physical, just like we were discussing last week. When you astral travel, you feel yourself to be physical.
Mm, that's right.
But
So
you're not physical compared to your normal physical reality. You just shifted to a different reality.
yep. So when you're out of body, if you actually put your hand up and then get your finger and push it into your hand, it feels exactly the same as your physical hand. It's you can feel it. It's soft. It has temperature, right? And that was stunning to me when I first did it, because I thought somehow my finger was just going to go through my hand, but of course, this because I was consciousness, and that consciousness was vibrating at a frequency that was all the same, then of course it felt corporeal. You see, this is the difference. The other thing is that with all these orbs like are seen and used by lots of different beings. So the orbs are the most innocuous type of contact. So you'll see an orb go through, or an orb appears on a picture, or there's orbs all over the place. So other races will go, well, since humans don't fear orbs, we'll just present ourselves as an orb.
Hmm.
Okay, and so this is the whole point about you know more people take pictures of orbs than they do of craft.
Yeah, and it could be anything. It could be, orb could be absolutely anything.
It can be anything, and if it's on a camera, and it could be a speck of dust that's just been picked up, but from a contact perspective, I think that the whole disclosure movement needs to take a breath, because at this point it seems a little bit chaotic, or even actually very chaotic. You've got so many different people trying to take control of the narrative, And the problem is with that is, if you look, I've just watched Stephen Greer's disclosure stuff, and there's lots of information in there and good people telling their stories and all the rest of it. It's the one that's just been done a couple of days ago. And then, of course, you mix that in with things that are said by Grush and other people. You see some of the images that come out. And then, of course, you have to think about all the people that have actually been contacted. And, some people have been taken. Yes, let's agree to that. But then I've just watched a video 10 minutes ago where somebody from some three-letter organization somewhere was saying that they staged extraterrestrial abduction scenarios for people. Yeah, look, that's great. That they're not doing that globally. Okay, so they may have done it in isolation, but when you talk to people from Spain and Europe and all France, Australia, America, and they're saying, look, I'm having contact. This is what's happening. It's not just these organizations that are causing this to happen. And it's really got to be thought about much more widely. If we can just agree globally, okay, that we're not alone in the universe, that's the place to start.
Yeah, yeah. And especially when you think about, I mean, even from the perspective of some of the alien civilizations, it's complicated because there's many, many civilizations. It's not that there's one that's contacting us. So you have many physical races, you have interdimensional races, you have spirits, right, which is part of our, Earth system, also interacting, which can be confusing to people. And like as you've said, that sometimes spirits will mess with people and pretend to be aliens because they think it's funny. And actually, I could see why that's funny. You know,
I can too. I think it's hysterical.
I can't promise I wouldn't do it myself. If I passed out, I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
just a
yeah.
little bit. So it's a huge, it's super, super complicated. And we have 80, 90 years of cover up. And I think I mean, this is contact is ancient. Who knows what's in the Vatican archives? I would love to see that opened up, right? So it's a huge, huge mess. But at the same time, I'm really curious to see in the next few days, just like, my normie friends, who's going to say something? I bet you for 90% of the planet or more, 99%, they're not even going to notice. At this stage, most people still don't even notice. So it's going to be chaotic and it's going to be a mess, but it's like we're still so early in this whole process.
I guarantee, yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Like, how many normal normal people, I'm sure, sorry, how many people are actually just even going to acknowledge this? I mean, most people wouldn't even care, unless it's on mainstream media and they're going, well, this is what's happened and here's three dots, and people go, yeah, there's three dots. Well, yeah, I mean, that
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
mean anything to anybody.
No, they've got to roll out a proper craft and, take the cover off, say, hey, this is it. We found it. Look, we're poking it and we're trying to, then maybe people will pay attention. But yeah, most people from this kind of information, they're not even going to register, but it does start to slowly infiltrate. I mean, it's like, I think it's a smart move, I think, or at least, on the part of, I guess the government and, the alien civilizations that are trying to do this gently. I think this is the way to do it. I mean, it's going to take some time. It's going to slowly build. Some people notice and they talk to their friends. Hey, did you see that? Yeah. I think it wasn't really good footage. I don't believe it. Okay. But the next time and the next time and slowly, I think more and more stuff's going to come out. So I think we'll get
Well,
there, but
there's
it's going
there's
to be years.
something that people don't talk about, and it's the third part of disclosure, and it's based around plausible deniability.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
of course, plausible deniability means that a spirit person can show themselves to somebody, and then the next day you think, did I imagine that, right? And for them, they've given their little evidence, but they're also able to cause doubt. Extraterrestrials and races do exactly the same thing. Humans do exactly the same thing. That this spaceship was now a weather balloon, all this stuff, plausible deniability. Basically, it's been keeping the checks and balances in place. Jacques Vallée brought out this hypothesis in 1972, I believe. Then the Zetas were talking about it. And they said that they don't want to ever put all of their information in one place. So, and spirit people are the same.
Hmm.
So, uh, uh, theoretically, plausible deniability actually is real and exists. It's a good way to get people to understand that there's something else going on, but of course it doesn't embed itself in your life. That's the other thing. It can't always be all that you think about.
Yeah,
There's got to
yeah,
be, the reality is, and think about this, the birds, the animals, the trees, everything out there have no idea of our political systems, have no idea of the wars that are going on, have no idea of what money is, right? And so we have created this fake environment that we live in, and all the rest of the planet and all the rest of the beings on the planet that are non-human, they're all just living their best life, enjoying the sunshine, right? And what are humans doing? Sitting there scrolling on social media.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And with plausible deniability, it also makes you look like maybe okay, you see something, something happens because that's I think part of the point is you yourself need to go look, open your mind to the broader possibilities, and because it's a really big change. It'll really change your thinking, and especially when you start to grasp how complicated this is. You know, it's really hard to think about infinity and the infinite. It's impossible. But okay, we can start to expand our thinking to okay, there's other solar systems near us. There's other races. Okay, something with interdimensionals. But what happens after that? I mean, I bet it must be just so weird and bizarre. The further and further you get away from us. I mean, we're still thinking about everything in terms of the humanoid form, and maybe that's all we're going to be able to handle for a while. But what else is out there? I bet you there's other stuff too. So it's going to get, it's going to get weird, and it takes a while. So if I can see why, for your own psychological stability, it's something that you have to take part in that search, or else you're going to become destabilized.
Can you imagine source consciousness? How destabilized source consciousness is to reference itself through you, me, and everybody else, and every other thing it's created. So it's getting all of this feedback from this vast infinite universe building itself as it's going along. And so if that is a concept that a person can't even imagine, imagine, this very much smaller concept, which is disclosure. And I think if people can understand that there's physical beings, there's interdimensional beings, there's spirit beings, there's astral beings, and we understand that we have these categories, then we can build even ourselves a framework, because just believing everything's no good, that doesn't help, because you become destabilized. What you ultimately need to do is just go, well, okay, so I've just seen a shadow. Well, did the shadow happen because a car drove by, or did I see the shadow because somebody in the astral was moving through my frame of reference, or is it a spirit person? And once people start to understand that they need to try to classify um, and put them into classifications as to what these energies are, then you can understand, you have a frame of reference for this information. But at this point in time, all we have is dots and orbs that are being photographed, and people going, we just don't know what they are.
Yeah,
That's the real
yeah. I mean,
issue.
it's interesting when you read the Zeta interviews, how many possibilities there are. Because that comes through. And sometimes people will ask the Zetas, okay, what about this? They say, well, it could be this, it could be that, it could be this. We need to look at that particular case. There's so many possibilities for what can occur because it is an infinite universe. And there's infinite dimensions, and there's infinities within infinities, and dimensions within dimensions. I mean, consider that the spirit realm is itself infinite internally,
Yeah.
right? But it's still somehow, it's still, limited in a sense because it doesn't take over everything. But inside of it, you have an infinite space to explore. Well, that's happening all over the place. So the only way I can conceptualize it in any ways, I think of numbers like the number line. You can start counting. You can count very big numbers. You can count very small numbers. But in between any two numbers, there's another infinity of numbers always. You count from 5 to 5.5. There's an infinite number of numbers between 5 and 5.5. And between 5 and 5.1, it's an infinity. In 5.01 and 5.001, it's like no matter what you do, there's always an infinity in there. Okay, then you start to grasp this is it's something beyond just the word infinity that we have to use. It's much 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 more. It'll actually make you go crazy if you think about it too much, I think.
Um, Look, one of the best examples I ever had was if anyone's read my work, there was a contact that we had for over a few months, myself and another medium, with a race called the Honorians. And the Honorians believed that they were one step away from source. Now, when I first tried to access this race, it was as though I was standing behind a big sheet of glass, and all I could see was a sheer plane of light that was flat, completely flat. But it just went forever. And you could hear them talking behind the glass to us, myself and another medium, and they had a thought, the Honorians had a thought, would I like to come closer? And I felt myself even just shifted slightly towards them. And as I was, the glass in front of me cracked, and I realized that I was about to lose everything I knew about myself and my construct. I pulled back straight away. Now, even that one experience taught me that we have to be very, very careful where we go, what we do, who we associate with in regards to beings, because ultimately they could be completely benign and innocuous, very, very loving, but in their attempt to want to communicate with us, we could somehow be changed. And we have to make sure that we're very, very careful in the way that we approach these phenomena.
Wasn't that the race also that created a child of theirs in front of the whole entire audience, right? Maybe that's a good story too, because it also gives us a sense
Yeah.
of a little bit about what's happening here, that they can, that there's, you can do it yourself, because you are right now an aspect of your higher self. Like, you are a projection of consciousness
Yeah.
into this physical form. But that whole concept too is that you can project consciousness into, and they can be independent on its own for a period of time. But maybe if you could tell us that was an incredible
Yeah.
story.
So we do public sittings where there's 30 or 40 people turn up and sit, and we go into a deep trance state. And the Honorians came through and were talking to the audience. And we only did this 3 times because it turned out that there's a unfortunate ramification to contact with beings like that are on a plane of light. But that what they did was they said that we want to bring a child, we want to create a part of ourselves as a child. And so there was another medium next to me. And what they did was they created the aspect of themselves through that medium, and then cut themselves off from that creation. And that entity, that child entity that they created, believed that it had always existed as a child. The Honorians themselves, because they had cut themselves off from their external creation, believed in themselves that that child had nothing to do with them. And they were able to speak to the child and reflect information from the child back to themselves to gain experience. Now, that sounds really complicated, but the way they did it was quite simple. And it was like you create your own thought form, disassociate from it, and now you start speaking with it as though it's a sentient entity. That's all it really came down to. But what the ramification was, and I want to allude to this, was that 4 or 5 days after having contact with that race, I was standing there outside, and suddenly everything around me went completely translucent, and I could look down through the planet. All the trees were clear. Everything had a pale blue translucency to it. All the buildings were clear, and I was told that this is really what reality was, and but that what we were doing as humans, our consciousness was filling in the gaps and making it look very, very real, right? Because basically we're just consciousness in a physical form. And I said to the Zetas, I said, I never want to experience this again. It was too destabilizing, right?
Mm.
And that's why when people talk about how exciting it is to contact extraterrestrials and aliens and interdimensionals, we have to realize that there's no way to be trained for the experience. No one can talk you into the experience. No one can talk you through the experience. And I would suggest that a lot of people would become quite unstable if they had those experiences. So this is something I think that we all need to be very aware of, that when we are talking about wanting to connect or contact other beings, that once those beings actually are given sort of permission to connect with a person, there has to be a framework around that, and I call it guardrails. There has to be a place where you set your boundaries, where you have no contact, that your life is your own, that you're sitting quite solidly in in a grounded space, a three-dimensional space. So that's why I think a lot of people that do have contact look or seem to be unstable because they don't seem to understand they've got to pull back from that and just live a normal life, and then occasionally they have the contact.
What's one of the most interesting things about that? One of the best lines, I think, or for me, one of the lines that I like most in the Zeta interviews is when the Zeta say, "If you were to incarnate with full knowledge of your higher self, there would be no point to incarnating." And they say that you are the filtering process for your higher self. When you think about that Honorian example, what makes it interesting is that if they can create an aspect of themselves, cut themselves off from it, now they have the opportunity to learn in a new way, to gain a new perspective through that new being, which is essentially what you are when you're here incarnated. You are a new, you're still connected to your higher self. You're still connected to other aspects of your consciousness. But the whole point of this is to live a human life and to gain the perspective of a human life. So I mean, that's why I think not only is it important to be grounded for your own psychological stability, but it's sort of like what's the point in like it's like going on vacation somewhere and then turning around and wanting and just thinking about home. It's like you're on vacation, enjoy the vacation, and a little bit here it's like you're a human, just be a human. I understand the curiosity, but it's like live a human experience. There's going to be plenty of time for, you know, floating around in the clouds or, zipping around doing whatever later when when you reunite with your higher self. So it's important, like you say, don't go overboard. Like I need to do this all the time and meditate all the time and be in constant contact. Yeah, a little bit, but then like you say, pull back, be normal, go for a walk,
The thing that
enjoy
the thing
life.
that's important to remember is you can't actually contact extraterrestrials if you're in the spirit realm. And so this is your opportunity now in this three-dimensional space to
Mm-hmm.
actually use your container, your form, to actually think about and connect with all these other beings and races and whatever. Um, Once you leave this physical container, and there's something about this planet specifically that allows you to move from this space to other spaces. Whereas once you're in spirit realm, you can manifest and create thought, creational spaces, but you won't be dealing with what are classed as, real entities. You'll know that they're still just thoughts, right? And so the situation exists that where you are right now has given you the ability to be able to uh, journey, to be able to go on those
Mm-hmm.
journeys as well and meet all the beings. And for me, we started talking about disclosure when we first started. I would just hope that ultimately they do it slowly, they do it carefully, and that it just becomes a conversation. Oh, there's another downloaded files, and this is
Mm-hmm.
happening, and it's really interesting, and people slowly realize that it's just part of their normal existence, rather than downloading. A picture of a craft with aliens walking out of it and shocking everybody, which is what a lot of people want. A lot of people in the disclosure movement do want to see those types of footage, in contact situations. But I don't know that the actual planet, the world, is ready for that sort of thing at this point.
Yeah, I understand people want that because they've been thinking about it for a long time. But imagine there's billions of people that haven't thought about this at all. And so you can't just go all of a sudden slap them across the face with a picture of an alien. That's like, they got to ease into it. So
It-
I agree. I think what I've seen is maybe every 30 days there's going to be another release. I mean, the agencies are fighting with each other. So it's going to be, who knows? It might be slow, but it does look like we're going to get regular releases of files and photos and things. So
the other
we'll
problem,
see.
the other problem that exists is AI, because there's so much AI generated information on the internet. people are going to have a lot of trouble working out what's real information and what isn't. What's generated or hallucinated information from AI as well.
Yeah, that's why it's good that they have these official sites, because that's what I've been doing is like I need to see it on the official site. I'm not looking at just someone tweeting about something. It's like that could be a fake video,
Yeah,
it's like I want to see that actually came from like, one of the government sites. So I know that at least it's real footage, and then I can think about it.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, yeah,
Well, good stuff. Listen, I think, disclosure date. I think that's it. I think we're gonna can mark our calendars down, May 8th, 2020, what are we in? 2026? Not bad. You know, um but I think we will look back at this as like an important day. It's the end of the beginning, as the saying goes.
maybe they should make it a public holiday.
So yeah, exactly. Maybe 20 years from now we will. It'll be bigger than Valentine's Day.
We'll look back on this in 20 years and go, that was nothing compared to what we know now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Good. I hope we do. I hope we do. But all right, everyone. As always, if you have any questions, just drop them down below. And thanks for coming back, Paul. And we'll see you next
Yeah.
week.
Okay. See you later, guys.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.